ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for watching the show. This is your Top Human Rights Organization Review, and I'm your host, Bryce Dolan. Now today on the show, we're going to look at 5 different top human rights organizations and look at the top stories from each one of their websites. Before we start the show today, let me be one of the first to wish you a happy Thanksgiving and safe travels during the holidays. Now to begin the show, in strife towards Syria, millions of men, women, and children are in desperate need of immediate assistance to survive in these difficult times. The ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, endeavors to meet the needs of the affected population by procuring items globally, with India emerging as one of the most important countries from which it sources such items. Thus, rice grown in the paddy fields in the Indian state of West Bengal and thousands of blankets manufactured in the mills in northern India have been slowly making their way to Syria. It took many months for the ICRC to identify the appropriate items that meet the requirements of the affected population. As part of the sourcing process, samples were sent for lab testing where rigorous quality checks were carried out. The consignment, duly sealed by the ICRC, was then shipped to Syria and distributed among the tens and thousands of people in need. This short video film captures the different stages of this journey from India to Syria.
The 5-year-old conflict in Syria has displaced a significant population in the country. Thousands of women, men, and children continue to be in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. Meeting the ever-growing demand for relief assistance has always been a challenge, and the global humanitarian operations of the ICRC would go to any length to acquire relief items, even if it has to be shipped to Syria from thousands of miles away.
India, for the time being, is one of the big hubs for sourcing.
The ICRC delegation in India has been buying items from India for a very long time.
We have a long-term agreement with this company from 2010, and this is the company who is supplying us blankets for all our emergency stocks and also for all our emergency situations such as Syria today.
We sourced rice for the first time in India. Our HQ decided to buy from 2 mills in Burdwan, South Bengal, in India.
The rice grains being purchased undergo a series of quality checks to make sure they are fit for human consumption.
এই চালটার মধ্যে কোনো পোকামাকড় আসছে কিনা বা চালটার মধ্যে কোনো ড্যামেজ যাচ্ছে কিনা কোনো গন্ধ আসছে কিনা না চাল দেখলাম ঠিক আছে মশলারও মাপলাম দেখলাম যে মশলারও একদম ঠিক আছে
It has been analyzed and they found that it's non-GMO product, that it's without insect and that it's fit for human consumption.
We would be buying something like 1.5 million to 2 million blankets per year. We do generally stock them in our regional emergency stocks worldwide, and of course we also supply them directly from Panipat to countries such as Syria, or ultimately Mali was one of the recipient countries.
450 tons of high-quality rice have been bought from Burdwan, which is popularly known as the Rice Bowl of India.
Now it will be sent to Kolkata port, and from Kolkata port it will go straight to Syria by vessel.
We make a living by what we get, but we can make life by what we give. So that way we feel that this is more of a giving thing and it should do them good.
सब ब्लैंकेट ये सीरिया जा रहा है आईसीआरसी के थ्रू, क्योंकि वहाँ प्रॉब्लम चल रहा है। हमें सेटिस्फेक्शन होती है कि हम भी किसी की हेल्प कर रहे हैं। हम तो चाहते हैं जल्दी से जल्दी बेचारे अपने ठीक हो जाएं, खुशहाल हो जाएं।
In Syria, what they will receive from India is so important in terms of value because they don't have enough food, and this quality of rice, which is very good, will really save life.
The ICRC continuing to do great work. Now next, according to UN Watch, the UN just elected Saudi Arabia to a 3-year term on its Human Rights Council, and Saudi Representative Abdulaziz Al-Wasil has arrived in Geneva to take up the post. Membership on the UNHRC gives Saudi Arabia, which has the world's worst record on women's rights, the right to vote on, influence, and oversee numerous mechanisms, resolutions, and initiatives affecting the rights of women worldwide, including elimination of discrimination against women and equal participation in political and public affairs, to only name a few. Check out this anti-Saudi Arabia campaign ad to get Saudi Arabia expelled from the Human Rights Council. Think they should be on the council? Help spread awareness with the hashtag #ExpelSaudi. Now next, government and rebel forces in and around South Sudan's southern town of Yei have committed serious abuses against civilians in recent months, Human Rights Watch said. The abuses include killings, rapes, and arbitrary arrests by government forces and abductions by rebels. The abuses Human Rights Watch documented in Yei are just the latest example of attacks on civilians by both sides in the current conflict. Fighting between the Sudan People's Liberation Army, or SPLA, forces and rebels, and attacks by both parties on civilians intensified in the country's southern regions in the wake of clashes in the capital Juba in early July 2016. Hundreds of thousands of civilians have fled the greater Equatoria region in the south as a result. A proposal for a United Nations arms embargo is finally on the table after nearly 3 years of atrocities against civilians by armed groups in South Sudan, said Daniel Bekele, Senior Director for Africa Advocacy at Human Rights Watch. Security Council members should urgently support the measure, which helps stem the attacks on civilians. In November, the UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, Adam Dang, warned of a potential for genocide in South Sudan. On November 17th, the United States delegation to the UN circulated a new resolution at the Security Council for an arms embargo on South Sudan and targeted sanctions on individuals named in a confidential annex. This horrendous conflict has had a devastating impact on South Sudanese civilians, and it is worsening in large part because no one has suffered any consequences for committing grave crimes, Bekele said. The UN, the African Union, and key governments need to urgently support an arms embargo and other measures, such as individual sanctions and the AU hybrid court, to hold those responsible for international crimes to account. So earlier in the show, well, a couple segments ago, we used the hashtag stop this movie because of the potential genocide in Burundi. Now, this is saying there's potential genocide as well in South Sudan. So this is the first arms embargo from the UN that's been put on the table in 3 years since this conflict has began. And thankfully, although it hasn't been acted upon really, at least this is the start of what really needs to help prevent this genocide from happening. Now next, 5 years after Bahrain's 2011 uprising, which saw peaceful protesters beaten, shot, and killed in the streets, key reforms introduced to address human rights violations by the security forces have yet to deliver justice to the vast majority of victims and their families, said Amnesty International. There is no denying that the Bahraini government has taken a step in the right direction by setting up institutions to investigate human rights violations and hold those suspected to be responsible accountable. Sadly, these reforms remain woefully inadequate. Torture and other ill treatment by security forces persist within a system of entrenched impunity marked by the lack of an independent judiciary, said Lynn Malouf, Deputy Director for Research at Amnesty International's Beirut Regional Office. True change needs to be more than cosmetic. Bahrain's authorities cannot continue to mislead the world with a mere veneer of reform, when accountability for violations has been scarce and critics and human rights defenders continue to be arbitrarily arrested and unfairly tried, convicted and imprisoned, banned from traveling abroad, or stripped of their nationalities. The Ombudsman of the Ministry of Interior and the Special Investigations Unit together have the power to bring much needed change and improve the overall human rights situation in Bahrain. But in order to be truly effective, they need to operate promptly and transparently and demonstrate their independence. This should be part of a wider process to end impunity and repressive practices, including ensuring an independent judiciary, said Lynn Malouf. So the Ombudsman of the Ministry of Interior and the Special Investigation Units have been formed in Bahrain, but they really haven't done anything to start investigating these human rights violations. So they're right. They've taken a step in the right direction. They've created these programs, these groups, these units, these organizations, and now you need to implement them. Now that they are created, like they said, a step in the right direction, but we need to continue to step in the right direction. Now, to end the show, human rights and the rule of law in Hungary have been under sustained attack since Prime Minister Viktor Orbán took power in 2010, reveals FIDH, the International Federation for Human Rights. Now, FIDH urges the government to halt this assault and calls for a strong and prompt reaction by the European Union, up to the activation of Article 7 of the Treaty on European Union, which could lead to the suspension of Hungary's rights under the treaties. The 84-page report explains how the new constitution, the fundamental law, and over 600 laws and measures adopted since 2010 have had an adverse impact on human rights across sectors and negatively affected the separation of powers, an essential element of democracy and the rule of law. All counterpowers from the judiciary and the legislative power to media and civil society have been systematically weakened or brought under control of the executive. What should serve in a democratic state as checks and balances to ensure democratic oversight and accountability for government's actions has been undermined in Hungary to an extent that they can no longer safeguard democracy, the rule of law, and human rights. Besides infringement proceedings and exchanges between the European Commission and the Hungarian government regarding specific aspects in the legislation, which raised concerns regarding their compatibility with EU law, no concrete steps have been taken to date by the EU to address the situation more broadly. This despite worrying signs of similar developments in other EU member states, further undermining the rule of law, in which the EU's inaction towards Hungary may have inadvertently paved the way too. So hopefully the EU's inaction against Hungary, what they're not doing with Hungary to stop them from undermining international law and human rights, they could possibly send a message, or what they said, pave the way for other countries to do the exact same. Hopefully not. We always wish for the best. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you can find all these articles, the links to all these articles, directly below in the description. I encourage you to check them out. The links will take you directly to the articles on their respective websites. Make sure while you do that, you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get notified every time a new video is posted. Make sure you give us a like on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And one more thing you have to make sure to do. Have a great Thanksgiving, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for watching your show. This was the Top Human Rights Organization Review, and I was your host, Bryce Dolan.